My teachers told the school I moved away, but I've been locked in our basement for 5 years. My parents are hiding me because I'm evidence of my father's affair with his student. The delivery driver saved my life, and he didn't even know it. I heard his footsteps above me at 3:47 p.m. on a Wednesday in late September, heavier than Mom's careful tread, different from Dad's aggressive stride. The doorbell rang 3 times, insistent. Then his voice carried through the heating vents, muffled but clear enough. "Package for Graves, needs a signature." Mom's response was barely audible, but I heard the driver again, louder this time. "Ma'am, I can hear someone downstairs. You sure everything's okay?" That's when I started screaming. 5 years of silence shattered in one desperate moment, my voice cracking from disuse as I hammered against the steel door Dad had installed. The driver called 911 before Mom could close the front door. I know because I heard her begging him not to, heard the panic in her voice as she tried to explain away the sounds. "Just the television, the basement TV, we keep it loud." But he didn't leave. Smart man. He stayed on that porch until the police arrived. My name is Ethan Graves, and I was 13 years old when my parents locked me in our basement. I'm 18 now, though I stopped counting birthdays after the second year. The basement became my entire world, a converted space with concrete walls, a bathroom Dad had roughed in himself, and a mini fridge he restocked every Sunday night while I slept. He'd slip in at 2 a.m., leave groceries, take out trash, and vanish before I woke. We never spoke. Mom communicated through notes slid under the door, instructions about keeping quiet, promises that it was temporary, that they were protecting me from something worse. I believed her for the first year. By year 2, I understood the truth. They weren't protecting me, they were hiding me. I was evidence of Dad's crime, and as long as I stayed invisible, his career survived. Before the basement, my life was aggressively normal. I went to Riverside Middle School, played soccer on weekends, had friends who came over to play video games in our finished basement, the very space that would become my prison. Dad taught history at the high school across town, a popular teacher, the kind students loved because he made lessons feel relevant, brought in guest speakers, organized field trips. He was 41, athletic, the kind of man other fathers envied and mothers noticed. Mom worked part-time at a dental office, kept our house pristine, volunteered at school functions. We looked perfect in photos, the kind of family that attended every school play and never missed church on Sundays. Underneath, rot was already spreading. I just couldn't see it yet. The affair started when I was 12, though I didn't know about it until much later. Vanessa Laurent was 17, a senior in Dad's AP history class, brilliant according to everyone who knew her, headed for an Ivy League school with scholarships already lined up. She stayed after class to discuss college essays. Dad offered to mentor her. Mom knew about the mentoring, even approved of it. "Your father has always been generous with his time," she told me once, pride in her voice. What started as academic guidance became something else entirely. I pieced it together later from overheard arguments, from documents I found, from the way Mom's face twisted when she looked at me after everything came out. Vanessa got pregnant in the spring of my 8th grade year. She was 18 by then, technically legal, but Dad was her teacher, a position of authority. That made it illegal anyway, a felony in our state. Career-ending, prison-worthy. Everything Dad had built would collapse if anyone found out. Vanessa's parents discovered the pregnancy in late May. I remember that week clearly because Dad stopped coming home for dinner, and Mom moved through the house like a ghost, eyes red, hands shaking whenever the phone rang. I thought maybe someone had died, maybe Grandma or one of Dad's siblings. The truth was worse. Vanessa's parents wanted Dad arrested, wanted him registered as a sex offender, wanted his teaching license revoked and his name destroyed. Mom told me all this much later, her voice flat with practiced resignation, as if repeating a story she'd told herself 1,000 times to make it bearable. Dad hired an expensive lawyer, a man named David Kent, who specialized in making scandals disappear. Kent was good at his job. He found leverage. Vanessa had sent Dad messages first, had pursued him according to text records Kent somehow obtained. The pregnancy resulted from a relationship that, while inappropriate, was technically consensual once she turned 18. Kent negotiated. The Lawrence wanted money more than justice. Dad paid them $200,000, nearly everything my parents had saved, including my college fund. In exchange, Vanessa would graduate, move across the country for school, and never speak Dad's name again. The baby would be given up for adoption immediately after birth. All evidence would be destroyed. No police report would ever be filed. The agreement held for 3 months. Then Vanessa changed her mind about the adoption. She was 19, living in California, attending college on a full scholarship. She had the baby in early January, a girl she named Sophia, and she started asking questions about whether she'd made the right choice accepting the money. Her roommate convinced her to talk to a lawyer. That lawyer saw dollar signs and a case that could generate national headlines. He contacted Vanessa's parents, who referred him to the documentation they'd kept, despite the agreement. Copies of everything. Text messages, emails, photos, medical records proving the timeline. The lawyer drafted a letter to Dad's school district outlining the affair, the pregnancy, the payoff. He gave Dad 2 weeks to resign or face public exposure. Dad didn't resign. Instead, he made a choice that destroyed what was left of our family. I came home from soccer practice on a Thursday in late January to find both parents waiting in the kitchen, faces grim. Mom had been crying. Dad's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. "Sit down, Ethan," Dad said, voice cold. I sat. He explained the situation in clinical terms, talking about Vanessa like she was a problem to be solved rather than a person. He talked about the lawyer's threat, about how the school board would have no choice but to fire him if the story broke. "We'd lose everything," he said. "The house, our savings, our reputation. I'd never teach again. Do you understand what that means?" I nodded, not really understanding. Mom reached across the table, gripped my hand hard enough to hurt. "We need you to help us, sweetheart. Just for a little while. Just until we can fix this." The plan was insane, so insane I laughed when Dad first explained it. They wanted me to disappear, not run away, not move to a relative's house, disappear completely. Dad had a colleague at another school who owed him a favor, someone who could create transfer paperwork showing I'd moved to live with a fictional aunt in another state. The school would update their records. My teachers would be told I'd left abruptly due to family circumstances. My friends would be given a similar story, and I would stay in the basement, out of sight, until the scandal blew over. "How long?" I asked, my voice small. Dad shrugged. "Few months, maybe. 6 at most. Once Vanessa's lawyer realizes we're not backing down, once he sees we have nothing left to lose, he'll move on. These people want easy settlements. We just have to wait him out." Mom squeezed my hand tighter. "It's the only way, Ethan. If this gets out, if people know what your father did, they'll come after all of us. They'll dig into our lives, interview your friends, talk to your teachers. You'll be harassed, bullied. Kids at school will make your life hell. This way, you're protected. You're safe." The word safe echoed in my head. Safe in a basement, safe in hiding, safe from the consequences of Dad's choices. I should have said no, should have walked out, called a friend's parents, gone to a teacher. But I was 13 and terrified, and my parents were convincing. They always had been. I agreed to 2 weeks. They nodded, relieved. The basement was already prepared. Dad had spent the previous week converting the space. The old rec room where my friends and I had played video games was gone, replaced by a small studio setup. A bed in one corner, a desk with some books, a mini fridge, a microwave. He'd installed a bathroom, just a toilet and sink behind a curtain. The windows were boarded up from the outside, covered with insulation and drywall from the inside. The door was replaced with something heavier, steel reinforced, with a lock that required a key from both sides. "Temporary," Dad said again as I looked around. "Just until things settle." That first night, I couldn't sleep. The darkness felt different down there, heavier. I could hear my parents walking around upstairs, normal evening sounds, TV playing, dishes being washed, life continuing without me already. In the morning, Mom brought breakfast, pancakes and orange juice, like this was all perfectly normal. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Your teachers have been notified," she said. "Everyone thinks you moved to Ohio to live with my sister. No one will come looking for you. No one even knows to ask questions." The 2 weeks became a month. The month became 3. Every time I asked when I could leave, Dad's answer was the same. "Soon. The lawyer is still making noise. We just need a little more time." The isolation broke me in stages. First, I missed my friends, missed the noise and chaos of school, missed soccer practice and weekend games. I tried to stay busy with the books Dad brought, tried to keep learning, but motivation died quickly when there was no structure, no one to hold me accountable. I slept until noon most days, stayed up until 3 a.m. watching DVDs on a small player Dad had set up. Time stopped meaning anything. Days blurred together. My only human contact was Mom's brief visits to bring food and take out trash. She stopped trying to pretend this was temporary after the first 6 months. Instead, she talked about other things, safe things, weather, recipes she was trying, shows she watched. Never about my friends or school or the world I'd been erased from. I asked about them once, asked if anyone had questioned my sudden move. She hesitated, then shook her head. Everyone accepted it. Kids move all the time. No one thinks twice. That hurt more than anything. I'd been replaced, forgotten, like I'd never existed at all. Year 2 brought new horrors. My body changed in that basement. I grew 4 inches, gained weight from inactivity and junk food. My voice deepened. I became a different person physically, but no one saw it happen except me and the mirror over the sink. I started having panic attacks, hyperventilating in the middle of the night, convinced the walls were closing in. Mom brought me medication, anxiety pills she got from her doctor using some excuse about her own stress. "Take these," she said. "They'll help." They numbed me, turned everything gray and distant. I took them anyway because gray and distant was better than the raw panic. Dad visited exactly once during those 5 years. It was late, maybe 2 a.m., and I woke to the sound of the door unlocking. He stood there in the doorway, backlit by the hall light, and just stared at me. I stared back, waiting for him to say something, to explain, to apologize. Instead, he set down a box of groceries and left, locking the door behind him. I never saw his face clearly. In my memory, he's just a silhouette, a shadow that kept me buried. The lawyer's threats never materialized into action. I learned this later, learned that Vanessa's lawyer had moved on to other cases within 4 months, that the school had never been contacted, that Dad's job was never actually at risk beyond those initial 2 weeks. My parents kept me locked away not because they had to, but because letting me out meant explaining where I'd been. It meant admitting what they'd done. The lie had grown too big to contain. Easier to keep me hidden forever than face the truth. By year 3, I'd stopped asking when I could leave. The question felt pointless. I was furniture now, something inconvenient they'd shoved in storage and forgotten about. I created routines to stay sane. Exercise in the morning, push-ups and sit-ups until my muscles burned. Reading for 2 hours. Writing in a journal Dad had given me early on, pages and pages of thoughts that went nowhere. I wrote letters to my old friends, to teachers I'd liked, to the version of myself that had existed before the basement. I never sent them. There was no one to send them to. The delivery that changed everything happened on September 18th. I'd stopped tracking dates carefully, but I still kept a general calendar, still marked off days to prove time was passing. The driver's knock startled me. Deliveries usually came in the morning, and Mom always intercepted them before anyone got close enough to hear anything. But she'd been in the shower, hadn't heard him approach. When he rang the bell repeatedly, I made a choice. 5 years of silence, and I chose noise. I screamed. I hammered on that steel door until my hands bled. I screamed until my throat felt torn. Upstairs, Mom was frantically trying to explain away the sounds, but the driver wasn't buying it. "That doesn't sound like a TV," I heard him say. "That sounds like someone in trouble." His voice was firm, certain. He was younger, I learned later, mid-20s, had done 2 tours overseas and recognized distress when he heard it. His name was Carlos Rivera, and he saved my life by refusing to leave that porch. The police arrived in 8 minutes. I heard the sirens, heard multiple voices upstairs, heard Mom crying and insisting everything was fine, just a misunderstanding. Then a new voice, authoritative and male. "Ma'am, we need to check your basement. We've received a report of someone calling for help." Mom tried to refuse. She claimed there was black mold down there, that it was dangerous, that no one had been in the basement for years. The officer didn't care. "Either you open it, or we get a warrant. Your choice." I heard fumbling with keys, heard the lock turning, and then light flooded in, real light, not the dim bulb I'd lived under. 2 officers stood in the doorway, hands on their weapons, staring at me like I was a ghost. I stared back, squinting against the brightness, my hands raised automatically. One of them lowered his weapon, spoke into his radio. "We've got a juvenile, male, appears malnourished. We need medical and CPS at this location immediately." The other officer stepped closer, his face a mix of horror and pity. "Son, what's your name?" My voice cracked when I answered. "Ethan Graves. I live here. I'm their son." The scene upstairs was chaos. Mom had collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably, repeating, "We had no choice, we had no choice," like a mantra. Dad wasn't home yet, wouldn't be for another hour. The officers separated me from Mom, walked me outside into sunlight I hadn't seen in 5 years. It hurt my eyes, made me dizzy. I hadn't been outside in so long that the fresh air felt foreign, too clean, too open. An ambulance arrived, paramedics checking my vitals, asking questions I couldn't focus on. My heart rate was elevated, blood pressure low, signs of malnutrition and vitamin deficiencies. They wanted to take me to the hospital, but I refused. I needed to see this through, needed to watch my parents answer for what they'd done. A CPS worker arrived 20 minutes later, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She introduced herself as Allison Harper, 15 years with Child Protective Services, and she looked at me like I was a miracle and a tragedy in equal measure. She asked if I felt safe, if I wanted to talk. I did. I told her everything while we sat in the back of her car, away from my mother's hysterics. The affair, the pregnancy, the payoff, the plan that was supposed to last 2 weeks, 5 years in a basement because my father couldn't face consequences. Allison took notes, her expression carefully neutral, but I saw her hands shake slightly as she wrote. When I finished, she made a phone call, spoke quietly to someone, then turned back to me. "Ethan, I'm going to be straight with you. What your parents did is criminal. Kidnapping, child abuse, false imprisonment. This isn't a gray area. We're going to remove you from this home immediately, and there will be an investigation. Do you have other family? Grandparents? Aunts? Uncles?" I shook my head. My grandparents were dead, and Dad's siblings lived across the country. We'd never been close. Allison nodded. "Okay, we'll place you in emergency foster care tonight, somewhere safe. Tomorrow, we'll start figuring out the rest." Dad's car pulled into the driveway at 5:15 p.m. I watched from Allison's car as he got out, saw the police vehicles, the ambulance, the neighbors gathering on lawns. His face went pale, then red. He started toward the house, but an officer intercepted him, spoke quietly. Dad's eyes found me through the car window. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then he looked away, shoulders slumping, the fight draining out of him. He knew it was over. Detective Frank Coleman took over the investigation. He was a 23-year veteran, specialized in family crimes, and he treated me with a careful kindness that made me want to cry. We met the next day at the station, after I'd spent a surreal night in a foster home with people who asked if I needed anything every 20 minutes. Detective Coleman was in his 50s, graying hair, tired eyes that had seen too much. He recorded our conversation, asked me to start from the beginning. I did, walking him through every detail I could remember. Dates, conversations, the layout of the basement, the routines my parents had established. He listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When I described Dad's single visit, the detective's jaw tightened. "Your father didn't see you for 5 years?" he asked. I shook my head. "Just that once. He mostly pretended I didn't exist." Coleman sat back, rubbed his face. "Ethan, I've worked hundreds of cases. This is one of the worst. I want you to know that we're going to pursue every possible charge. Your parents will be held accountable." The charges came within 48 hours. Richard Graves and Diana Graves were arrested and charged with kidnapping, child endangerment, false imprisonment, and conspiracy. The prosecution added charges related to falsifying school records and fraud. Bail was set at $500,000 each. They couldn't pay it. Dad's lawyer, the same David Kent who'd helped cover up the affair, refused to represent him this time. "I don't do criminal defense," he said, "and even if I did, I wouldn't touch this." The story broke locally first, then spread. "Teacher held son captive for 5 years to hide affair," the headline read. My school photo from 8th grade ran next to a current photo taken at the hospital. The difference was shocking even to me. I looked hollowed out, older, like something vital had been carved away. The media frenzy was intense. Reporters camped outside the house, outside the jail, outside the courthouse. Riverside School District issued a statement condemning Dad, confirming he'd been placed on administrative leave years ago for unrelated reasons they couldn't disclose. That was a lie. He'd still been teaching. The district was covering itself, pretending it had known something was wrong. Vanessa Laurent gave an interview from California, tears streaming down her face as she described the affair, the pregnancy, the payoff. She said she'd had no idea about me, no idea Dad had a son he'd hidden away. "If I'd known," she said, "I would have called police immediately. No child deserves that." The foster home was temporary, a way station while CPS figured out permanent placement. The family was nice enough, an older couple whose own kids had grown. They gave me space, didn't push me to talk, let me exist quietly in their guest room. But I couldn't settle. 5 years in a basement had rewired something in me. Open spaces felt wrong. Silence felt threatening. I slept with lights on, woke up panicking when I couldn't immediately see all 4 walls. A therapist came to see me twice a week, a man named Dr. Raymond Moss who specialized in trauma. He was patient, never rushed me, let me talk about surface things, weather and TV shows, until I was ready to dig deeper. "What you experienced is complex trauma," he explained during our 3rd session. "Your parents, the people who should have protected you, became your captors. That breaks something fundamental in how you see the world. It'll take time to rebuild that trust." I asked how much time. He smiled sadly. "However long it takes. There's no timeline for healing." The trial was scheduled for early December, but my parents' lawyer, a public defender named Grace Newberg, pushed for a plea deal. The evidence was overwhelming. My testimony, the basement itself, school records showing my fabricated transfer, medical reports documenting malnutrition and psychological damage. There was no defense that wouldn't make things worse. Mom agreed to testify against Dad in exchange for a reduced sentence. I wasn't surprised. She'd always been weak, had always chosen the path of least resistance. Her testimony painted Dad as the architect of everything, claimed she'd been coerced, threatened, that she'd wanted to let me out but feared him. It was partially true. Dad had been the driving force, but Mom had gone along willingly enough, had kept me fed and hidden and silent for 5 years without once calling for help. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Catherine Ellis, didn't let Mom off easy. "You had 5 years to make a phone call," Ellis said during the hearing. 5 years to walk into a police station. You chose not to. That wasn't fear. That was complicity. Dad refused to plea. He maintained that what they'd done was necessary, that I'd been in danger from the media attention, that they'd been protecting me. His lawyer tried to argue temporary insanity, claimed the stress of the affair and potential exposure had broken something in Dad's judgment. The judge wasn't moved. "Mr. Graves, you held your son prisoner in your basement for 5 years. You denied him education, socialization, medical care, and basic human dignity. There is no justification for that. None." The trial lasted 6 days. I testified on day 3, sitting in the witness box while Dad stared at me from the defense table. I told the jury everything, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. When the prosecutor asked me what I wanted people to know, I looked directly at Dad. "I want them to know that he chose his reputation over his son. He chose silence over my life, and I want him to know that I'll never forgive him for that." The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Dad got 25 years, eligible for parole after 15. Mom got 12, eligible after 8. They were led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, neither of them looking at me. I felt nothing. Not relief, not satisfaction, not grief. Just emptiness where they used to be. The aftermath was complicated. Allison Harper helped me navigate the system, finding a long-term foster placement with a family in the next town over. They were younger, mid-30s, with 2 kids of their own, and experience fostering teens. The adjustment was brutal. I didn't know how to live in a house with other people, how to navigate dinner table conversations or family movie nights. My foster siblings tried to include me, but I was an alien in their world, someone who'd missed 5 years of growing up. I was 18, but felt both younger and older, a kid who'd been frozen at 13, and an old man who'd seen too much. School was impossible. The district offered to enroll me, to give me a chance to finish high school, but I couldn't sit in a classroom, couldn't handle the noise and crowds and questions. I got my GED instead, studying alone in my room, taking the test at a quiet testing center. I passed easily. 5 years of reading had given me an education of sorts, just not the normal kind. Dr. Moss and I kept meeting, once a week, then twice when the nightmares got bad. He taught me coping strategies, ways to ground myself when panic hit, ways to distinguish between real threats and perceived ones. Your brain is stuck in survival mode, he explained. It learned that home wasn't safe, that parents couldn't be trusted. Now it assumes everywhere is dangerous, everyone is a threat. We have to retrain it, show it that safety exists. The retraining was slow. I started small, walking to the corner store alone, sitting in a coffee shop for 20 minutes, going to a movie matinee when the theater was mostly empty. Each outing was an exercise in controlled terror, my heart racing, hands sweating, convinced something would go wrong. But nothing did. Slowly, painfully, the world started feeling less hostile. I got a job at a library, shelving books in the quiet stacks. It paid minimum wage, but I didn't care. Being around books felt safe, felt familiar. The head librarian was an older woman named Pauline Stevens, who asked no questions about my past and gave me space to work in silence. I stayed there for 8 months, showing up every day, losing myself in the routine. The media attention faded gradually. New scandals replaced ours. A year after the trial, most people had moved on. But I hadn't. I was stuck in the aftermath, trying to figure out who Ethan Graves was supposed to be now. The boy who'd gone into the basement didn't exist anymore. The man who came out was someone else entirely, scarred and suspicious, and carrying weight that bent his spine. My foster family tried to help. They celebrated my 19th birthday with a cake and presents, treated me like I belonged, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was temporary, that any moment they'd decide I was too broken, too difficult, and send me somewhere else. Doctor, Moss said that was normal. You're waiting for the other shoe to drop, he said. You're waiting to be abandoned again. But these people aren't your parents. They chose to help you. That matters. It did matter. Slowly, I started to believe it. Vanessa reached out when I was 19. She sent a letter through my lawyer, asking if I'd be willing to meet. I almost said no. She was part of the story that had destroyed my life, the affair that started everything. But I was also curious. She'd been a victim too, in her own way. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. She was 24, looked older, carried her daughter Sophia on her hip. Sophia was 4, dark-haired and curious, unaware of the complicated history that had brought her into the world. Vanessa apologized immediately, tears in her eyes. I never knew about you, she said. I swear I didn't know. If I'd had any idea what he was doing, what they were doing to you, I would have called police. I would have done something. I believed her. She told me about her life, about finishing school, about raising Sophia alone, about the guilt she carried for her part in everything. I was 18 and stupid, she said. I thought I was special, thought he loved me. I didn't see him for what he was until it was too late. We talked for 2 hours. It didn't fix anything, but it helped. She wasn't the enemy. She was just another person Dad had used and discarded. I'm 21 now, 3 years out of the basement, and I'm still learning how to exist in the world. I live in my own apartment, a small studio I can afford with my job at the library and disability payments from a lawsuit settlement. The settlement came from a civil suit against my parents, a judgment for damages that I'll probably never collect since they have nothing left. But it's the principle. Legal acknowledgement that what they did was wrong, that I'm owed something for the years they stole. I still see Dr. Moss monthly. The nightmares are less frequent now, the panic attacks manageable. I've started taking classes at community college, not sure what I'm studying, just taking things that interest me. History, ironically. Literature. Psychology. I'm learning who I am in pieces, discovering interests and opinions I never got to develop. Some days are good. Some days I can't get out of bed, can't shake the feeling that the walls are closing in even though I'm in an open room. I'm dating someone, a quiet guy I met at the library who knows my story and doesn't treat me like I'm broken. We move slow, and he doesn't push. That's enough. Dad writes me from prison sometimes. I don't read the letters. I burn them unopened, watching the paper curl and blacken, smoke rising like prayers to a God I don't believe in anymore. Mom writes too, less frequently. Her letters I sometimes open, reading sentences that beg for forgiveness, that try to explain the unexplainable. She'll be eligible for parole in 5 years. She wants to rebuild a relationship when she gets out. I don't know if I'll let her. The anger is still there, buried under scar tissue and therapy techniques, but still there. Maybe it'll fade with time. Maybe it won't. I'm learning that I don't have to decide everything right now, don't have to have all the answers. Some wounds stay open, you just learn to live around them. The delivery driver, Carlos Rivera, and I stayed in touch. He comes by the library sometimes, checks in, asks how I'm doing. He never takes credit for saving me, says he just did what anyone would do. But that's not true. Plenty of people would have walked away, would have accepted Mom's explanation and moved on. He didn't. He stood on that porch and refused to leave until someone checked. That choice changed my life. I told him that once, tried to thank him properly. He shrugged it off, uncomfortable with gratitude. You saved yourself, man, he said. You screamed. You fought. I just made sure someone listened. Maybe he's right. Maybe we both played a part. Either way, I'm here. I'm out. I'm learning to live in light instead of darkness, learning that the world is bigger than a basement, that family is what you choose, not what you're born into. I'm learning that survival isn't the same as living, but it's a start. And sometimes, a start is enough. If you made it this far, hit like, you've earned it.